At Thanksgiving, my sister discovered I had $12 million and my family demanded I give it to her, claiming she deserved it more. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now, let us begin the throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specificate present modificate in. Please comment your country name below. Now, let's begin the video. I'm Sarah, 38, and I need to get this off my chest. Do you know those family dynamics where one child can do no wrong while the other seems completely invisible? Yeah, welcome to my life. Everything was pretty normal until I was 8. I was an only child, and while my parents weren't especially warm or affectionate, they were present. Mom helped me with my homework, and Dad occasionally took me fishing on Lake St. Clair. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but we were okay. Then came the night that changed everything. I remember my Aunt Kelly arriving at 2 a.m. and telling me to pack a suitcase because Mom was at the hospital. My sister Rachel was coming, but something had gone wrong. She wasn't supposed to be born for another 2 months. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits and whispered conversations. Rachel was so tiny. She looked like one of my baby dolls, except she was covered in tubes and wires. I wasn't allowed to touch her or even get too close. That was the first time I felt an invisible wall beginning to form between me and the rest of my family. When Rachel finally came home, our house became a sterilized bubble. Mom developed an obsession with germs. I'm talking industrial-strength disinfectant everywhere, hand sanitizer stations in every room, and non-stop cleaning. Even now, the strong smell of bleach makes me anxious, but here's the part that really messed me up. Anytime I showed the slightest sign of being sick, I was immediately sent to Grandma Marie's or Aunt Kelly's house. Every single time. One sneeze? Pack your bags. A mild cough? Off to Grandma's. At first, I thought it was fun. Grandma Marie baked cookies, and Aunt Kelly had an amazing collection of Nancy Drew books that I worked my way through. But kids aren't stupid. Eventually, you realize what's really happening. You're not being sent away on little adventures. You're being treated like a threat, as though your very existence could somehow put your beloved sister in danger. I tried everything to earn their attention in healthier ways. Honestly, everything. I got straight A's. Mom barely looked up from Rachel's latest doctor's appointment calendar. I won first prize at the science fair with a project on renewable energy. Dad's only response was asking if I could store the display board in the garage because Rachel was supposedly allergic to cardboard dust. Is that even a real thing? The real breaking point came when I was 12. I'd spent months practicing for the school talent show, teaching myself to play Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano. I know that's a little too fitting. The night of the performance, Rachel had a temperature of 99.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Guess who had nobody in the audience? Meanwhile, just 2 weeks later, the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, showed up for Rachel's 15-minute flute recital, where she basically butchered hot cross buns. Rachel quickly figured out how the system worked. By the time she was 7, she'd outgrown any serious health problems, but that didn't stop her from using them. Headache? Stay home from school. Feeling tired? Someone else could do her chores. Worried about a test? Mom would literally call the school and ask for an extension. I started spending more and more time in my room, burying myself in books about art history and antiques. Funny how life works out sometimes. My room became my sanctuary, mostly because Rachel claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener, so it was the one place she wouldn't go. Do you know what was actually messed up? Whenever she pretended to be sick, part of me felt relieved. At least I'd get sent to Grandma Marie's, where someone would ask about my day, or actually care about the things I was interested in. Grandma was the one who sparked my love of vintage jewelry. She had an incredible collection of costume pieces that she let me organize and catalog. I guess I should have seen it as a sign of what was to come. The worst part wasn't even the obvious favoritism. It was the way they rewrote history to justify it. Rachel just needs more attention because she had such a difficult start. Sarah's always been so independent. Sarah understands that her sister has special needs. No, I didn't understand. I was a child who couldn't understand why having a strong immune system somehow made me less deserving of love. Looking back now, I can see how those years shaped me. The constant message, The message that I was somehow unsafe or inconvenient to be around never really goes away, but at least it taught me to be self-sufficient. When no one checks your homework or celebrates your accomplishments, you quickly learn to become your own biggest supporter. Most people either loved or hated high school. Me? I saw it as my ticket out. While Rachel was building her drama empire in middle school, I was laying the foundation for my escape. And let me tell you, nothing motivates you to succeed quite like knowing no one else is going to do it for you. Remember how I spent hours organizing Grandma Marie's jewelry collection? That taught me something invaluable: the importance of systematic organization and attention to detail. In high school, I approached everything with that same mindset. My desk looked like something out of an organization magazine. Color-coded notes, carefully planned study schedules, and a place for everything. Rachel used to make fun of me for it, calling me Rain Man. Very classy, sis. But here's the thing about being invisible. No one pays attention to either your failures or your successes, so you might as well do whatever you want. I joined every club that fit around my part-time job at Carson's Diner. Thank you to Carol, the owner, for remembering my birthday when my own parents forgot. Debate team? Check. President of the National Honor Society? Check. Editor-in-chief of the school newspaper? Check. Debate was where I truly found my voice. There's something incredibly satisfying about dismantling someone's argument while staying completely calm. It also taught me how to negotiate, a skill I didn't realize at the time would become so valuable later. I won the state championship twice. My parents missed both competitions because Rachel had important soccer games. She was on the C team. She didn't even play. Junior year was when things really got interesting. I took the SAT and earned a perfect score. Not just a really good score. A perfect score. A full 1600. Do you know how few people achieve that? Less than 1%. I remember staring at the score report on the screen for nearly 20 minutes because I was convinced there had to be some kind of mistake. I ran home to tell my parents. I know, it was a stupid idea. Mom was in the kitchen helping Rachel with her English homework. The conversation went something like this. Mom, look, I got a perfect SAT score. That's nice, honey, but can you keep it down? Rachel's trying to concentrate. She has a big test tomorrow. Rachel chimed in. Yeah, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect. Mom immediately replied, Rachel, sweetie, don't stress. You're just a different kind of learner. I still have the paper copy of those SAT results somewhere. They never made it onto the refrigerator. But Rachel's C+ in English? That masterpiece earned premium refrigerator space, complete with a "We're so proud of you" magnet. The college application process was another story. I applied to 15 schools without telling anyone. I wrote every essay myself, collected all my recommendation letters, and completed every piece of financial aid paperwork on my own. My guidance counselor, Mr. Chen, was the real MVP. Since my parents were too busy to help with the FAFSA, he stayed after school to help me finish it. Then the acceptance letters started arriving. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan. Every single one came with scholarship offers. I kept them all locked in a box under my bed because I knew exactly what would happen if Rachel found out. The attention would immediately shift to her. What if Sarah goes to Harvard? I'll be all alone. Or something equally ridiculous. The day I received my full ride offer from Michigan, Rachel made the junior varsity cheerleading squad. Guess which achievement was celebrated with a big family dinner? Here's a hint. I ate microwave mac and cheese alone in my room while they went to Olive Garden. But you know what? That scholarship was my golden ticket. Tuition, room and board were completely covered. There was even a book allowance. For the first time, I could leave the house where I was either invisible or treated like an inconvenience. The day my acceptance package arrived, I went to my favorite place in the local library, a fourth-floor window seat overlooking the park, and cried for an hour. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. When I told my parents over dinner that I was going to Michigan, they looked horrified. But Michigan is so far away, Mom said. What if Rachel needs you? Then she added, I hope you're not expecting us to help with expenses. Rachel's cheerleading competitions are very expensive. Rachel's response? Oh my God, finally, can I have your room? I need more space for my TikTok videos. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at Carson's Diner to save as much money as I could. Carol, bless her heart, always made sure I got extra tips, and looked out for me. Take home leftover pie at the end of my shifts. She also taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my life: how to recognize genuine people in a world full of fakes. Baby, she'd tell me, in diners and in life, the people making the most noise usually have the least to say. Move-in day at the University of Michigan arrived. My parents couldn't come because, surprise, Rachel had a cheerleading competition. Aunt Kelly drove me instead. She helped me set up my dorm room and handed me an envelope with $500 inside. "Your Grandma Marie wanted you to have this," she said. "She's so proud of you." I found out later that Grandma had been setting aside that money from her Social Security checks for months. That first night in my dorm room, I made myself a promise. I was going to build such an incredible life that being overlooked would no longer be possible, not out of revenge, not to prove anything to my family, but for that 8-year-old little girl who used to get sent to Grandma's house just because she sneezed. College marked the beginning of something entirely new. Those years flew by in a blur of all-nighters, instant ramen, and the incredible feeling of independence. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Michigan. Not that my parents noticed. They were too busy helping Rachel transfer to her third college in 2 years. But this is where the story took an unexpected turn. I landed an entry-level position at Everett and Phillips Auction House in Detroit. I wouldn't use the real name for obvious reasons, but if you're in the industry, you probably know the place. It was a prestigious auction house with wealthy, old-money clients, the kind of establishment that handled high-end estates. I started in the estate sales department, cataloging the belongings of wealthy people after they passed away. Not exactly glamorous, but it paid the bills. For the first several months, the work was pretty routine. Cataloging endless china sets, sorting antique furniture, the usual. Then came the Kingston estate. Mrs. Kingston was an elderly widow who had passed away without children, leaving behind what everyone assumed was an enormous collection of costume jewelry. Rooms full of it. This was where all those hours with Grandma Marie finally paid off. I was sorting through another pile of jewelry when one piece caught my attention. It was an Art Deco brooch. Nothing flashy, but something about it felt different. It was too heavy for costume jewelry. The clasp mechanism was far too sophisticated to be a cheap imitation. I spent my entire lunch break researching antique jewelry makers' marks and signatures. That evening, I stayed late at the office to use the company's subscriptions to antique jewelry databases. The more I researched, the more convinced I became that this wasn't costume jewelry. It was the real thing. The problem was that I was the new employee. No one was going to believe me if I claimed we'd stumbled onto a valuable treasure. So I did what debate team had taught me. I prepared my case meticulously. For 2 weeks, I spent every lunch break and evening learning everything I could about Art Deco jewelry authentication. I even spent part of my tiny savings on an online gemology course. Finally, I worked up the courage to approach my boss, Mr. Harrison. I brought him a complete presentation with comparison photos, historical documentation, and every piece of evidence I had. The conversation went something like this: "Sir, I think we may have something significant in the Kingston collection." Mr. Harrison barely looked up from his phone. "Sarah, we've already cataloged those as costume jewelry." "I know, but look at these maker's marks. They're an exact match for Cartier's 1925 signatures." That finally got his attention. "Where did you learn all of this?" "I did some research." Long story short, that costume brooch sold at auction for $47,000. It turned out to be part of a limited collection created for a European royal family in the 1920s. But here's the real turning point. After that, Mr. Harrison started trusting me. He began assigning me more artifacts to authenticate. Suddenly, my seemingly pointless childhood hobby of organizing antique jewelry had real value. I threw myself into learning everything I possibly could about vintage jewelry. I enrolled in every online course I could afford. I spent weekends at estate sales studying pieces. I even started carrying a small notebook where I documented different authentication methods. My apartment looked like the workspace of someone obsessed with antique jewelry, with walls covered in printouts of vintage hallmarks and authentication guidelines. The auction house started seeing real results. I was identifying valuable pieces that everyone else had overlooked, building relationships with collectors, and developing a deep understanding of the market. My commission checks kept getting bigger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just getting by. I was actually building savings. My family, however, remained completely uninterested. I still showed up for Sunday dinners like a fool. The conversations always went about the same. Mom would say, "Sarah's still working at that antique shop, right? It's an auction house." And yes, actually, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece. Rachel would immediately interrupt. "Oh my God, speaking of jewelry, you guys have to see this charm bracelet I bought at the mall." But I didn't care anymore. For the first time in my life, I had found something that was completely mine, something I was genuinely great at, something that had nothing to do with being Rachel's sister or the family's disappointment. Then came the Rothschild collection. This was about 2 years into my job at the auction house. It was the estate of an old money family, and there was a tremendous amount of excitement throughout the industry. I was part of the team cataloging their jewelry collection when I noticed something everyone else had overlooked. It was a fairly ordinary-looking Art Nouveau piece. I spent 3 days researching it. I barely slept. It turned out to be a piece from the private collection of a famous French jeweler that had been believed lost during World War II. When it sold at auction for $238,000, Mr. Harrison called me into his office. I thought I was finally getting promoted. Instead, he said something that completely changed the course of my life. "Sarah, you're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own authentication business." At first, I brushed the idea aside. Me? Start a business? With what money? But the thought stayed with me. I started taking on small freelance authentication jobs on the side. Word spread that I had an exceptional eye. Private collectors began reaching out to me directly. One night, I was sitting in my tiny apartment surrounded by jewelry reference books and authentication tools I'd slowly collected over time when it suddenly hit me. This was something I could actually build. I could create something of my own. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I took out a large loan against my car. I emptied my savings account. I rented a tiny office in a less desirable part of town. People thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. The office was basically a storage room above a Chinese restaurant, about the size of a college dorm room. The rent was cheap because it constantly smelled like kung pao chicken, and the Wi-Fi only worked if you sat in the corner by the window. But it was mine. The first few months were interesting. And by interesting, I mean terrifying. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning in a cold sweat, calculating how many months I had left before my savings ran out. The loan payments felt like a noose around my neck. My office furniture consisted of a card table I bought from Goodwill and a chair I literally found sitting on the curb. Don't worry, I cleaned it thoroughly, but in the world of high-end jewelry, reputation and connections are everything. And my experience at the auction house had given me both. I started small, doing authentication work for local antique dealers. My fees were lower than those of the larger firms, but people were beginning to notice my attention to detail. Word spread. 6 months later, everything changed. One of the dealers I'd worked with at the auction house contacted me about a collection of Victorian-era brooches. The owner wanted them authenticated before putting them up for sale. It turned out to be an enormous collection spanning 3 generations of one family. I spent 2 straight weeks working on it, barely sleeping, documenting every single detail. During that process, I identified 2 exceptionally rare pieces that had been mistakenly classified as later reproductions. The owner was so impressed with the thoroughness of my work that she not only paid my fee but also offered me a 10% commission when the pieces sold. That commission came to $86,000. It was more money than I'd earned during the previous 2 years combined. Suddenly, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Private collectors had heard about my ability to identify overlooked treasures. Estate attorneys started calling for advice on inherited jewelry. Even my former auction house began sending me authentication work. I'm pretty sure Mr. Harrison was quietly helping spread the word. Thanks, boss. By my 2nd year in business, I'd hired my first employee, Jenny. She was a recent gemology graduate who reminded me far too much of myself at that age. Brilliant, but often overlooked because she was quiet. Today, she's my head of authentication and worth her weight in gold. The business grew faster than I ever imagined. We moved into a real office downtown. Goodbye, kung pao chicken smell. I built a team of specialists. I became known for finding overlooked treasures. You'd be amazed how many historically significant pieces of jewelry end up being mistaken for costume jewelry in people's attics. Keeping all of this from my family, however, became increasingly difficult. The more successful we became, the harder it was to keep everything hidden. They still believed I worked at an antique shop. During family dinners, Rachel would make sarcastic comments. "Sarah, I have some old jewelry I was planning to donate to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop would want it." That same morning, I'd authenticated a piece worth $1.2 million. "Sure," I'd reply. "I'll take a look." Mom would introduce me to people by saying, "This is my other daughter, she works with old jewelry," or something along those lines. Meanwhile, I had been quoted in Forbes thankfully under my company name, and we'd recently opened our third office. Oddly enough, keeping the secret became almost fun. It turned into a private joke I shared only with myself. I'd sit through Sunday dinners wearing my Target clearance outfit, or so they thought, while listening to Rachel talk about her entry-level marketing job, knowing I'd just closed a deal worth more than her annual salary. I even started playing little games with myself. I'd wear authentic Harry Winston pieces to family gatherings just to see if anyone noticed. They never did. One time, Rachel spent 20 minutes showing off her expensive $200 Michael Kors watch. Meanwhile, I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe worth more than her car. As the business grew, though, managing that growth became the real challenge. By our 5th year, we'd opened offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I spent more nights on airplanes than in my own bed. We earned a reputation for absolute discretion. It turns out a lot of wealthy clients want their jewelry authenticated without the rest of the world ever finding out. The money became substantial. We eventually needed an entire team of financial advisors. Even so, I kept my lifestyle relatively modest. I bought a beautiful but understated home in a nice neighborhood. I drove a luxury car that didn't attract attention. The only place I truly splurged was my home office. State-of-the-art authentication equipment, the best security system money could buy. A custom-built vault that would make Fort Knox jealous. The irony? My family thought I was struggling financially while helping them. Mom would say things like, "It's so sweet of Sarah to help out. She must be living on nothing but ramen." Meanwhile, I'd just authenticated a collection that earned me a commission larger than their mortgage. You know what's strange about success? The more successful you become, the harder it is to explain your life to people who've always seen you as less than. It's like trying to explain color to someone who's only ever seen black and white. They simply don't have the frame of reference. By that point, though, my company was thriving. We had essentially cornered the high-end jewelry authentication market throughout the Midwest, and our reputation was solid gold. Pun intended. Yet every Sunday, I'd still drive to my parents' house for dinner, playing the role of Sarah, the modest antique shop employee. The contrast had become almost ridiculous. I'd spend my mornings on conference calls with collectors in Dubai, my afternoons authenticating million-dollar pieces. Then I'd spend the evening at my parents' table wearing carefully selected ordinary clothes, eating Mom's overcooked pod roast while Rachel dominated the conversation with stories about her latest marketing achievement. Usually something like successfully bringing her boss a cup of coffee without spilling it. One Sunday stands out more clearly than all the others. I'd just finished a major authentication. A long-lost Cartier piece had been sitting in someone's safe deposit box for 40 years. The commission alone? 7 figures. I drove straight from that meeting to my parents' house, still riding the excitement of the successful authentication. Mom looked at me and asked, "Sarah, honey, is everything okay? Your clothes are looking a little worn." "Oh, I replied, just trying to save money. I was wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater that I'd intentionally chosen because it looked understated." Rachel smirked. "Well, if you'd gotten a real job instead of playing with old jewelry." Dad interrupted. "Rachel, be nice. Not everyone can be as successful as you." I nearly choked on my pot roast trying not to laugh. Around that same time, I began making anonymous monthly bank transfers to my parents. Aunt Kelly had told me they were struggling with Rachel's student loans and medical bills. Mom had casually mentioned they might have to sell the house. I couldn't let that happen. Despite everything, it was still the house I grew up in, so I started anonymously depositing $5,000 into their account every month. Whenever anyone asked, I insisted I was only contributing $1,000 by living on rice and beans. They assumed the rest was coming from Aunt Kelly or another family member. Rachel, of course, took credit for inspiring everyone to help. Watching Rachel spend my money became an experience of its own. The financial support helped my parents, but it also created consequences I never expected. They began treating me with a strange mix of pity and patronizing admiration, as though I were some noble martyr living in poverty for the sake of the family. Meanwhile, Rachel's spending habits became increasingly extravagant. She'd show up to dinner carrying expensive designer handbags, insisting she'd found them at outlet stores. She hadn't. I can spot a genuine Gucci from 20 paces away. She started taking lavish vacations and posting about her blessed life all over Instagram. I'm almost certain she was using the money I was secretly providing to fund shopping sprees, but I never said a word. The irony was almost too perfect. Then came the MBA drama. Rachel announced that she wanted to go back to school for an MBA. Naturally, it had to be a private university, only the very best for the golden child. Mom called me in tears, explaining that they couldn't afford it. I said, maybe Rachel could look at state schools. They have really good programs too. Mom replied, oh honey, you don't understand. Your sister needs to maintain certain standards. So I increased my monthly contribution for a few years. I raised it to $7,000 a month. It barely affected my finances, but watching them praise Rachel for taking initiative with her education, while assuming I was surviving on ramen to help support the family, that stung a little. The real irony? I was scheduled to give a guest seminar at the very same business school Rachel wanted to attend. My family had no idea. The dean had personally invited me to lecture on luxury goods authentication and business growth. I had to come up with an excuse for missing Sunday dinner that week. My own accomplishments had started to feel like part of a completely separate life. It was as though I were some kind of corporate superhero with a secret identity. By day, I ran a multi-million-dollar authentication business. By night, or at least on Sunday evenings, I was simply Sarah, the disappointing daughter who worked at an antique shop. The weight of that secret kept getting heavier. Rachel continued making rude comments about my career. Mom kept apologizing to her friends for my modest lifestyle. Dad kept suggesting I should get a real job. I think I always knew it would end dramatically. I just never imagined it would explode quite so spectacularly. It happened on Thanksgiving. 2 weeks before the holiday, Mom called me in tears about her back pain. She'd been diagnosed with a herniated disc, and the thought of cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 20 people was overwhelming. I'd love to tell you I offered to help purely out of kindness. Honestly, I was just tired of pretending her dry turkey tasted good. So I said, why don't I handle the food this year? I'll have it catered. She immediately replied, oh, honey, we can't afford a caterer. Don't worry about the cost. I've been saving. She sounded concerned. You're not taking out a loan, are you? I arranged everything through the same high-end catering company I used for business events. Their food was incredible. The kind of meal that makes you wonder why anyone cooks at home. The bill cost more than my parents believed I earned in 2 months. But that didn't matter. Thanksgiving morning arrived, and I was actually in a good mood. I had my laptop with me because I needed to monitor a major online auction taking place in Hong Kong. A magnificent Art Nouveau necklace was up for auction, and one of my clients wanted it authenticated if they won the bidding. The food arrived right on schedule. Everything was perfect. Naturally, Rachel had something to say. Store-bought stuffing? Really, Sarah? Mom's is so much better. This coming from the woman who once set off the smoke alarm making toast. Mom kept apologizing to everyone for not cooking herself. But it was obvious everyone loved the meal. Rachel stopped criticizing after tasting the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per serving than her weekly grocery budget. Between dinner and dessert, I slipped away to check my laptop. The auction was becoming intense, and I needed to be ready if my client won. I set up in my old bedroom, which Mom had left exactly the way it was when I graduated from high school. Meanwhile, Rachel's room had been remodeled 3 different times. That's when everything fell apart. I'd left my authentication software open, with multiple tabs displaying various accounts and active contracts. Rachel walked in without knocking. Some things never change. She said she was looking for my phone charger. Then she saw my laptop screen. She immediately thought she'd found the perfect opportunity to expose what she believed was my sad little life. With a smug smile, she said, let's show everyone what Sarah's really been doing. Before I could stop her, she grabbed my laptop and carried it into the dining room. Picture the scene. 20 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents. Everyone full of gourmet turkey and halfway through expensive wine they'd assumed came from Trader Joe's. Rachel announced proudly, time to see what kind of important work Sarah's doing on Thanksgiving. She spun the laptop around, clearly expecting to embarrass me with whatever small antique transactions she thought I was working on. The room went completely silent. So quiet you could hear the expensive clock I'd given Mom for Christmas ticking across the room. She still believed it was a reproduction. My laptop screen displayed, current account balance, $12.4 million. Pending authentication contract, $485,000. Recent transaction, $1.2 million. Hong Kong auction. Company quarterly profit report, $4.2 million. Rachel's expression cycled through 5 different emotions in about 3 seconds. The last one settled somewhere between shock and nausea. She actually swayed on her feet. In a whisper, she said, "This can't be right." Mom looked at her. "Rachel, honey, what is it?" Rachel's voice cracked. She's rich. Sarah's rich." If possible, the silence became even deeper. Then Mom started laughing, not just smiling. Actually laughing. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," she said. "Sarah works at that little antique shop." I slowly stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my plain cashmere sweater that cost more than their monthly mortgage. I said, "Yes, actually, Mom. I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. For years, every time you called it that little antique shop, I authenticate pieces worth millions. That little business you never asked about has offices in 3 cities." Dad nearly choked on his drink. Aunt Kelly dropped her fork. One of my uncles started coughing uncontrollably. Then Mom's laughter disappeared. Her face turned red, then purple. She stood so quickly that her chair crashed backward onto the floor. "You have millions?" Mom screamed. "And you let us struggle?" I replied, "Struggle? I send you $7,000 every month." She shot back, "While sitting on millions, your sister has student loans." And there it was. Not "Congratulations." Not "We're so proud of you." Just anger that I hadn't given them even more money. Rachel burst into tears. "I know. Shocking." She sobbed about how she deserved to know and how I'd betrayed the family. Then Dad joined in. "How could you be so selfish? We're your parents, we raised you." That was the moment I finally snapped. Years of being ignored, years of being dismissed, years of being dismissed, years of being treated like the family's disappointment. Everything came pouring out. "Raised me? You sent me to Grandma's house every time I sneezed. You missed every achievement, every award, every milestone because Rachel might feel left out. You never saved a single penny for my college, but you took out loans for her private school. And now you're angry because I built something for myself?" The next 5 minutes were complete chaos. Mom screamed about family obligations. Dad shouted about ungrateful children. Rachel alternated between crying and demanding to know exactly how much money I had. Meanwhile, the catering staff awkwardly tried to serve dessert while pretending none of it was happening. I picked up my laptop, grabbed my Hermes bag which Mom had previously complimented as a very convincing fake, and walked out. As I left, I could hear Mom already discussing how they should spend my money. Something about Rachel's MBA. Something about buying a new car. I drove home in my practical car, a limited edition BMW. Before I even got there, my phone had exploded with messages. The family group chat was in complete meltdown. Rachel had started posting on Facebook about hidden family wealth and selfish siblings. The days after Thanksgiving felt like watching a slow-motion tornado. Except the tornado was my family. And the destruction was my sanity. Let's start with the text messages. Within an hour of leaving dinner, I had 47 missed calls and more than 200 text messages. Mom's messages followed a fascinating progression. 7:42 p.m. "How dare you walk out on your family?" 8:15 p.m. "We need to discuss this like adults." 9:33 p.m. "Your sister deserves a share of your success." 10:30 p.m. "I've already spoken to a realtor about houses in better neighborhoods." 11:45 p.m. "Why aren't you answering? This is your mother." Meanwhile, Rachel had gone into full social media warrior mode. She posted a massive Facebook rant about how her millionaire sister had hidden her wealth while letting her loving family struggle. The comments were unbelievable. Distant cousins. Former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. Suddenly, everyone had strong opinions about my character. But this was the part that really got me. Rachel actually wrote, "All those years I spent trying to help Sarah's career, giving her advice about moving up from that little antique shop, and all along she was secretly rich. The betrayal hurt so much." I almost threw my phone across the room. Do you know what the only career advice she'd ever given me was? She once suggested I should try selling jewelry on Etsy. If you've never heard the term flying monkeys, it's what happens when toxic family members recruit other people to pressure and guilt trip you. Aunt Susan, whom I saw maybe once every 3 years, called to tell me that family is everything. Uncle Bob, who, I'm fairly certain still thinks I'm 12 years old, emailed me a long lecture about the importance of sharing wealth. Even my third cousin's wife's sister and I still have no idea how she got my number, felt obligated to share her opinion about family responsibility. But the real fun started when they showed up at my office. I walked in on Monday morning to find Mom, Dad, and Rachel sitting in our reception area. They had told Jenny, my receptionist, that they had an appointment for authentication services. Rachel was clutching her Michael Kors bag as though it were actually worth something. The conversation went exactly as well as you'd expect. Mom said, "We've talked it over as a family." I replied, "A family discussion without the family member you're discussing." Ignoring my comment, Mom continued, "We think it's only fair that you set up trust funds for everyone." Rachel immediately added, "I need at least $2 million to start my new life properly." Dad chimed in, "And your mother and I would like to retire. We're thinking about buying a beach house in Florida." I looked at them. "Did you all somehow miss the part where I've been sending you $7,000 every month?" Rachel answered, "That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us." "Owe you?" I asked. "For what exactly? The years of being ignored? The missed graduations? The constant comparisons?" Mom sighed. "Don't be so dramatic, Sarah. We gave you everything." "No," I said. "I gave myself everything. And you know what?" I said. "I gave myself everything. And you know what? I'm done." Right there in the lobby of my own office, I pulled out my phone and canceled the monthly transfers to their account. Mom gasped as though I'd slapped her. Rachel launched into another dramatic crying performance but stopped almost immediately when she realized it wasn't working. Then things got ugly. They refused to leave. I had no choice but to call security. Watching my 60-year-old mother being escorted out while yelling about ungrateful children was one of the strangest moments of my life. Jenny asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. But I did have all three of their names added to the building's do not admit list. The harassment continued for weeks. New phone numbers, fake email addresses. They even tried contacting me through my company's customer service department. Eventually, I had my attorney send a formal legal notice warning them that continued harassment would result in legal action. Mom tried one final move. She called Grandma Marie. But here's the thing about Grandma Marie. She was wiser than all of them put together. Her response? "Good for Sarah. It's about time someone in this family succeeded on her own terms." Mom didn't speak to her for the next 2 months. It's been 6 months since Thanksgiving. I've moved into a new home with better security. I've changed all of my phone numbers. As for the business, we're doing better than ever. Ironically, my family situation ended up bringing in several high-profile clients who appreciated the way I handled everything with discretion. Rachel is still posting passive-aggressive updates about toxic wealth and family betrayal. From what I've heard, she's planning to start her own jewelry authentication business. Good luck with that. Mom and Dad finally stopped trying to contact me after my lawyer sent them an official letter explaining exactly how harassment charges could affect them. Now they're telling everyone they never wanted my money in the first place, and that they're praying for my salvation. The best part? For the first time in my life, I feel free. No more Sunday dinners filled with subtle insults. No more minimizing my accomplishments to protect their feelings. No more funding the Rachel show. My therapist says I'm finally setting healthy boundaries. I say I'm finally living authentically. So that's my story, Reddit. Thanks for letting me share it. And special thanks to the catering company that sent me a Christmas card saying our Thanksgiving dinner was the highlight of their year. Edit. Answers to some of the most common questions. Yes, I'm still in therapy. No, I don't regret cutting them off. Yes, Grandma Marie is doing well. She's coming to visit next month to help me catalog a new collection. One last thing. Rachel, I know you're probably reading this. That Cartier bracelet you're wearing in your latest Instagram post? Definitely fake. Just saying. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.